The house. If someone had stepped unannounced into 8 Prodrozhny Street, they would have been confronted by the following picture. Greeting the visitor right at the threshold is an enormous pile of cigarette butts, which are everywhere, in a stone barrel with lion-pawed feet, in regular glass jars and in piles around the landing. A good battery of coffee mugs is arrayed at the bottom of the staircase, all of them with a thick layer of black leftovers inside. A little further away stands a grey-green CRT television atop a thick length of pipe. Taped to the TV screen is the warning, "Read a book, don't watch TV." The semantic games actually begin from the moment the visitor opens the outside gate, because the mailbox nailed to the fence is covered with a dense, tiny, almost illegible scrawl that says, in free translation, something like this. In this house live especially cool and intelligent guys, and you, visitor, don't even come close to them. The poor postman had to read this pretty frequently. During the day, Teofil goes off to work and makes money, so only Adam and Suliswaf are at the house, and the gym's doors are closed. The fridge has to be filled, after all. You can't just haul all your necessities from your parents' house. An average morning. The house is damp and chilly. Suliswaf hasn't gotten up, and Adam hasn't gone to bed. He is sitting in his room on the floor, itself a very cold place, but he's gotten a rug that covers the whole surface, though God knows how long it's been since it was clean. There is a bed in the corner, but the mattress is on the floor under a heap, at the top of which lounges a trench coat. In the room are 2 dark green boxes that share the coat's military heritage, and in them are clumps of Adam's clothes and some other things. The mirror-doored wardrobe covering the wall has all its doors hanging open loosely, and out of them pours a river of socks, ties, and handkerchiefs. On top of the wardrobe is a line of empty bottles of alcohol, the nice, collectible kind. If someone had managed to get their hands on a bottle of Beefeater 10 years ago, they put the yeoman warder in his thick red stockings up there to keep watch, because such beautiful things must never be thrown away. And everywhere else, on the edges of shelves, high up, low down, on tables and desks and any other free surface, are cups of paintbrushes, pencils, and other miscellaneous clutter. Old playing cards, dice, pieces of tin toy soldiers, dried flowers, African drums, Burmese shadow puppets whose enormous silhouettes appear on the wall above the bottles, tons of black and white photos of unknown people who'd once gifted these portraits to others and written dedications along with them. They have gelled curly hair and gentle eyes, and all of them are turned slightly away with their chins raised as if gazing into a bright future. There is a German calendar from 1940 on the wall showing the world's loneliest off-green winter photo, a memento mori with a gigantic cross on it. The date is December the 31st, and beneath the photo is a tiny message. Silvesterabend auf dem Rigi, des Jahres letzter Sonnenuntergang. There are more pictures on the wall, but Adam has done these himself. Some nice pieces of plywood with rounded corners found among the rubbish were filled with grey chalk doodles of chemistry flasks, models of the universe, and the symbolism of unidentified religions. Adam's desk has one leg, which is just a fence post with some markings on it. Out of nowhere, a tablecloth trimmed in lace and embroidered with chamomile designs lies on top of the desk. This must have been stuffed secretly into Adam's bag by his mother Ava, although it is possible that she'd used it to wrap jars of mushrooms or other delicate foodstuffs. The stitching holding the lace is torn in places, and this beautiful ersatz item has already begun melting into the general atmosphere. In an enamel pot on the floor next to Adam, a spoon is sticking straight up out of kasha made yesterday, or earlier. Kettlebells have been hauled in from somewhere, and in the middle of any other activity, Adam might jump up from his heels and start flailing them around like a whirlwind. The room's only chair is also a training bench, on which he does strange, swinging exercises meant to stretch his muscles. His friends call Adam's room the epicentre. Its middle was the place that Adam was just then living in, which is to say, wherever the place called his bed was. This might move over time, more towards the inner wall in winter and under the window in summer, or elsewhere further along, wherever was necessary to drag it. A phenomenon they called layered indifference, or terrifiant, radiated from that point outwards. In the closest circle were enormous half-full coffee mugs, now adapted into ashtrays, socks, books, and here and there some art supplies. A bit further from the centre were a whole bunch of typical dishes, bowls, plates, knives, forks, with different leftovers in them. But as you moved along the indifference, away from the centre, the dishes only got more peculiar. Serving bowls, measuring spoons, gravy boats. This may or may not have happened, though it likely did, but someone once found a meat grinder near Makiewicz's door, and someone had eaten noodles out of it with a whisk. Like true heroes, his friends helped clean this room a couple times a year. Adam himself was almost incapable of doing so. It was a good thing, of course, that the mass of clutter did somewhat diminish on its own. While boiling water for coffee, Adam had shattered any item that even remotely resembled a rounded hollow dish. On the other hand, it's not as if there was a constant stream of useless junk. In a certain sense, a shattered vase is now multiple things. It has reproduced. The fact that everybody constantly smoked inside also helped to cultivate the house's personality. And they smoked endlessly, 1,000 packs a day. The nasty funk of cigarettes was everywhere in the house, though at that time it didn't occur to them that this should be some kind of problem. They didn't notice the smell. The house's inhabitants considered the kitchen to be a very cosy place. There were shelves and drawers on two sides and a warm carpet in the middle of the floor. An ideal place for sitting cross-legged in a circle with coffee and to smoke, smoke, smoke. It was especially good when the oven still worked, but on one of the chillier winter nights, one idiot friend, he had a big postman's canvas bag, a long overcoat, black longish hair, and only ever thought about girls, heartlessly heated the gadget with coal, which was not a good idea because something in the oven broke, and from then on the heroes could only heat the house with electricity. This was the beginning of the end. In terms of dishes, if somebody needed something, he went into the bathroom and looked for it in the dirty heap there, washed it, and set it to lie there dirty after using. The coffee machine was always in there. Even when the pitcher had been drunk to the last drop, the machine stayed. And don't think that anybody ever washed it. Nope. New water in, and you're off. The boys could think of no other way to use this revolutionary period in their lives than as a complete bacchanal. Over time, this could turn into very taxing work. Of course, they were proud of moving there. They were no longer 3 losers living in their mother's basements, but 3 cool amigos with their own house. Life in the house was a long and limitless party. They typically woke up late, certainly not before 11. Adam was often on the opposite cycle and only went to bed around 7. But sometimes he got up for a bit in the morning to make coffee and then went back to his sag. In the summer, they had their coffees outside on a wooden platform they dragged into the yard and put beneath the windows. It was a delightful time, and their conversations frequently lasted 3 or 4 hours. Usually, coffee time ended in the middle of the afternoon, if not later, and this was when the boys started discussing how to lure in another party. Even if girls were thrilled by the house and the boys at first, the value of their stock started to decline quickly over time. Eventually, the girls ended up not much liking the fact that the lads were on a straight-shot road to alcoholism. Solisvaf may be a little bit less than the others, sure. Because if there was one thing people did in the house at 8 Prodrozhny, it was drink. Filek once thought that they'd drunk at least a full tanker of vodka. At one point, simply drinking vodka became somehow numb, maybe, and in order to excite their senses a bit, they looked for all sorts of different and more interesting places to drink, both in the yard and the house. Although it's not as if there was anywhere special for them to try. But different stacks of wood, garage roofs, the train station platform. That one was mystically beautiful in winter, covered in snow. You sit straight on your bum in the snow with vodka in your hand. You watch the moon shine and you blow smoke towards the stars. The attic, the neighbour's garden. Adam and Filek once drank in the bathroom, the one with the unwashed dishes, but not in a gay way. And one autumn, Felix gathered some amanita mushrooms from the nearby forest, and a whole band of people ate them and went to the train station platform for some enlightenment. Enlightenment didn't come, but simply a strange and feverish feeling. Eventually, everyone vomited. One girl actually didn't, since she'd refused to eat any mushrooms, but she contributed to the event by frying the mushrooms up in a pan. The next morning, everyone said they'd had tremendously beautiful, colourful dreams. A 24-hour gas station nearby helped them drink. The comrades routinely trod this path. At that time, the gas station still sold vodka at night. Smokes and prepackaged sandwiches were also a thing, because the local food shop was almost always under renovation at the blessed time that the losers inhabited the house. So their diet was made up in large part of gas station stuff, which is to say that it was dry, tasteless, and greasy. A very cute, curvy girl worked there, Paula, who always served them kindly, if a little bit dejectedly. They could typically make it work with small change, for the most part, anyway. Just jingle a grubby little pile onto the counter and ask for a bottle of vodka, no problem. And in the case of cigarettes, this was more the rule than the exception. Out of all of them, Soliswaf was the most businesslike, and occasionally went off somewhere to take care of various things. The rest of them loafed around doing nothing most of the time. And the rest of them refers to all sorts of different people. Adam had a whole train of decent dudes and girls who don't put out that he still invited over from time to time. Otherwise, he'd have felt down and not even bothered to get out of bed. In addition, there were different third parties living in the house at different times, probably around 7 or 8 in total at the height of things. Jerzy Niemiec, King of the Losers, was a seasonal event among them. He got in touch and showed up on his own terms, was around for a couple of months, maybe, and then disappeared again for half the year. At that time, some girls still tagged along with him. He didn't have to lift his pinky to get them, but doubtless they had a certain connection with Niemiec's periods of activity. Marcelina, Viola, one girl who had a blood condition, and then Natalka. God, Natalka. A workaday winter morning in the house was a quiet, hardened moment in a world that otherwise sped along at a gallop. Adam lit his last or penultimate bedtime smoke and crawled under the heap on his mattress, while Soliswaf was almost up and planning to go for his first morning coffee. He had 3 cigarettes laid out on the table, which was exactly how much goes with one pitcher before you're out of smokes and you have to go hunt for them in the city. Holding his blanket around him, he stumbled into the grimy corner called the kitchen. Of course, there was no wood, so he had to go steal some from one of the neighbours, but otherwise the water came out of the sink, and soon a strong coffee substance in a sturdy mug was pulling at him. With 2 cigarettes behind his ears and one in his hand, he spooned in a nice pile of sugar and then went outside to smoke. Because Soliswaf was the kind of aesthete who didn't smoke in his own room, and as long as the weather was better than foul, he dragged himself out into the fresh air. Detached from reality and utterly aside, this life produced amazing dream worlds. Because when night fell and Teofil returned home, tired but content, they set new porridge boiling in one of the cleaner pots and gathered in Adam's room, where the strained and electrified contemplation began. Everything in the world was turned on its head. Young Zawisza sat with a standard pencil and a white piece of paper and drew a map of the new world, while Felix and Adam competed by tossing out facts and factoids about states, rulers, societal structures and so on, down to agricultural implements, continually fleshing out, outdoing and developing the other's thoughts until they had a true, complex, thoroughly existent land and a state, and not a failure like Poland, where they inadvertently happen to live. Because there is nothing too hard for young people's reason, and the most important thing is that they see possibilities. They see them in the past and in the present moment. For them, the future is a great, waving, singular mirage where there floats a phantom utopia. It makes no difference whether they want to build a nation founded on brotherhood or escape into a capitalist paradise where your talent is prized and consequently priced. It makes no difference if you want to be a famous rock star, a philosopher, a poet, or a mechanic. It's all totally possible, And the only blocks on the road to happiness, either of humanity or the individual, are old, mouldy systems and mindsets that have outlived their time. Although the fairyland born out of their collaborations occupied an unidentifiable location and was, perhaps, maybe even outside of time, it simultaneously included elements of the feudal era, the light pink American 1950s, knights, sorcerers, anarchists and cops. Everything anywhere that seemed cool or spectacular was grafted onto the fantasy. It is hard to understand how this chimera differed from reality because, to think back on it now, all cool things exist in the world at every moment, even if they are too sparse and there is not enough of them for everyone. Therefore, you might view it as a world of ellipsis from which everything empty, boring, grey and conventional has been removed. And in truth, what arose was indeed truly motley and colourful, if also very limited. Naturally, there's no pointing this out to the bold trio. Why shatter their illusions? They'll get blown to nothing anyway, and sooner than anyone expects, because real worlds are built on endless lines of failures that may seem arbitrary, unjust and cruel. But who knows? Maybe it is those that will bring us to the promised land. All the same, the house's blessed idyll sailed towards its inevitable end. The house was basically lived to pieces. A bunch of things happened one particular summer, although some had started earlier in the prior fall, and almost all of them had to do with girls. Namely, one boy would start to spend less and less time at the house, first shimmering between it and his girl. Later, the house became full of girls, and Adam, who was financing the entire circus, how is a separate issue, became very angry, and understandably so. He did not have a girl. At some point, he practically attacked Soliswaf out of nowhere, apparently because his shaving stuff was missing. The good atmosphere was gone. Filek was with his father on a trip that summer, so he was untouched by the worst of it. When he came back, he discovered that things in the house were somehow broken. Adam himself spent more and more time away from home until he disappeared completely, and no one knew where or with whom. And he'd rented his room to Jerzy Niemiec. The issue of rent was a complete muddle, with everybody owing everybody at once. The accounting got vicious, and money, basically, scuppered their relationships. Things were peaceful with Jerzy at the beginning. He came, lived, and smoked inside. Lifted the mood. But since most of the lovers spent days and nights in each other's embrace, even Jerzy might feel himself a little bit lonely. Nevertheless, the union still functioned somehow. Occasionally even Adam came by, or sent some friends over to spend the night in the house. Finally, the water was cut, since no one had paid for it since they moved back in. For some reason, the house's inhabitants thought that they had free water. It's possible that the bill never came, because God knows where or to whom it got sent, or they simply didn't turn enough attention to life's mundanities. It was a uniquely stupid thing, of course, when you consider it, because, as they remembered, the house saga started in much the same way. It was as if all of Soliswaf's sweat and toil in selling off any useful Makievicz crap had blown away in the wind. At first, they decided to tighten their belts, take in the sequins and pay off the bill somehow, this time as a crew. We'll split it 3 ways. At just that time, Niemiec had been doing illustrations for Thought Experiment. He'd let 2 deadlines slip by, and everyone was waiting for him to finish so they could pool their money and be done with this bill bullshit. The next month and a half were identical to Soliswaf's first. They brought in water in bottles and buckets from the neighbours. But Jerzy, despite saying every day that really he was nearly done, was actually taking them all for a ride and hadn't even started on Thought Experiment. Then Nicola and Liliana moved out of the attic. From then on, the random dudes Adam sent started to propagate more and more on the upper floor. Filek didn't much grasp what was going on around him. Sometimes Natalka could be seen around Jerzy's room, so he presumed that they'd made up. But otherwise, the house's inhabitants didn't speak anymore, living inside like neighbours in a communal apartment who don't even know if there's anyone in the next room at all. He was so oblivious because for that last half year, Filek's eyes, ears and heart had been only for his Regina. Everything else that happened in the background was like a dream. He knew that there was something there, but he didn't find the willpower to focus on it, so his memories of the house's final period remained patchy. In any case, when it came out that Niemiec hadn't even begun work on Thought Experiment, that no money would come of it, and that everything was fucked, even this couple recognised that it was time to move out, and they left happily, hand in hand, off to their life's beautiful next chapter. Niemiec held out for a little while longer. No one remembers exactly how long, but when the house's electricity was finally unplugged, he went back to his mother's and immediately cut off all of his relationships with his friends and the outside world. Their last memory of Jerzy was that he was in a house with no heat, no water, and no electricity in the middle of winter, in a dark front room where there were 6 doors. After the fall of the house, Adam brashly sent Filek a letter in the name of all their mutual friends, entitled Résiliation de l'amitié, in which he damned Filek's marriage to hell and foretold of its imminent collapse. Of the end, there was one thing that was particularly sad. Did anyone ever, or never again, find a smooth marble tablet while cleaning the yard? There should be the inscription, Adam Mickiewicz, Sulisław Zawisza, and Teofil Wiatrak lived, worked, and had sex in this house.